Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first ever Cesar Chavez commemoration here for UCANR. And we're going to just dip a little bit into Cesar Chavez's life and legacy and of struggle for equity, justice, and unity. And like many of you know already, like Martin Luther King, Cesar Chavez wanted to bring change in a non-violent way. Many people supported Cesar Chavez because he believed in non-violence. Like Chavez, they also believed that farm workers deserve better treatment, respect, dignity, justice, and fairness. Let's take a look at the following video.
The 1960s were a time of enormous civil unrest. Demonstrations, face-offs, and riots characterized the political climate as the nation coiled in tension. In California, a man named Cesar Chavez led a strike of migrant farm workers demanding higher wages and better working conditions. The strike was part of the civil rights movement that addressed the needs of farm workers. It was a turning point in America's history. He envisioned equality and social change, not just for farm workers, but for all people. A leader of people who didn't have a voice. He would grow to become one of the most respected civil rights leaders of the 20th century. Born in 1927 Arizona, Cesar Chavez, as with many other Mexican Americans, was absorbed into the migrant worker lifestyle when his family lost their farm during the Great Depression. They moved to California in search of opportunity, but found only misfortune. He grew up impoverished and completed only 8 grades of school. In the late 1940s, after serving in the Navy, he married Helen Fabella and settled in Delano, California to start their family. After meeting Fred Ross, he worked his way from being a farm worker to being a farm labor organizer with Ross's community service organization. There, he registered voters, gave citizenship classes, and began to develop his vision for a struggle toward social change. In 1962, that vision for equality and social change manifested in the National Farm Workers Association. Along with the help of Dolores Huerta, it eventually became the United Farm Workers. He used this platform and his unparalleled leadership to expose to the American people the inhumane conditions and unfair wages that were imposed upon the farm workers. He fought for the farm workers' right to form their own union, which most other workers in the United States were privileged to have. He demanded that the workers have lunch breaks, access to clean drinking water and bathrooms, and that they receive fair wages and were able to collect unemployment insurance.
Workers are not working. They should have the right, as any other worker in America has today, to go to the Department of Employment and get a weekly compensation check so that they can live and live in not only decency, but also be able to live with themselves, be able to live with their families, and not have to depend on a handout or a charity.
When the workers went on strike in 1965, police violence against the farm workers resulted in severe beatings. When one worker was beaten to death, Chavez called off the strike. He, like his contemporary Martin Luther King Jr., remained steadfast in his decision to practice nonviolent protest. Not a single time did they ever retaliate.
Farm workers that they've been able to hold back and to continue to espouse the whole idea of nonviolence.
In 1968, Chavez fasted for a historic 25 days, bringing in national attention back to the movement and injecting much-needed hope and motivation into his supporters. Mass media coverage of his initial boycott of table grapes would increase the national awareness and add more pressure to the growers of the farms by humiliating them.
People litter, they have a right to let us in.
Are you sure of that?
I'm sure of that. like they're no longer employees.
Thank you. Get the hell out of my field, labor.
Finally, after years of striking in 1970, the UFW won a victory for the labor movement as the growers accepted union contracts and guaranteed the workers higher wages and improved working conditions.
We'll turn around and boycott machines all over the world. We'll try and make grapes, all the grapes, sweet grapes again.
Chavez's success inspired the emergence of new civil rights leaders such as Reyes Lopez Tijerina and Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez. Their contributions expanded Chavez's vision of social justice. Not only did he improve workers' rights, but rights for all people in the United States, forever changing the face of America. He also championed the preservation of the environment by fighting against the irresponsible use of pesticides. He continued to fight alongside farm workers, marching and fasting many times until his death in 1993. A year after his death in 1994, President Bill Clinton posthumously awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom. His wife Helen was there to accept the honor.
Workers who labored in the fields and yearned for respect and self-sufficiency pinned their hopes on this remarkable man who, with faith and discipline, with soft-spoken humility and amazing inner strength, led a very courageous life.
In many places around the country, his legacy is honored in street names, in parks, in schools, and in libraries. His birthday has become a holiday in several states. Now, he is the first Latino to have his memory solidified forever in a monument on a major university campus.
We just saw at the beginning of this event a quote from Cesar Chavez that reads, "The fight is never about grapes or lettuce. It is always about people." In September 7, 1965, Larry Ayala convinced 2,000 Filipinos, farm workers, to walk away from the California vineyards and began the famous Delano grape strike. But they had to convince Cesar Chavez, the leader of the Mexican workers, to join them. The task was left to Larry Ayala. Ayala soon contacted Cesar Chavez and asked Mexican farm workers to join the strike. He understood that all workers had to stand together in the fight for justice. Chavez didn't think his people were ready to go on strike, but he took Ayala's request back to the National Farm Workers Association, and along with Dolores Huerta, spoke to nearly 1,000 members. In an unanimous vote, the Mexicans joined the Filipinos. A year later, their both organizations merged to become the United Farm Workers. Together, Filipinos and Mexicans mounted a historic and victorious great strike that electrified the world. Let's take a look.
I remember we were working when my father says, "Come on, we're leaving." I says, "We're leaving, it's 10 o'clock in the morning." So we left.
To go on strike, you suffer a lot of hardship. Maybe you get hungry, maybe you're gonna lose your car, maybe you're gonna lose your house.
And I remember leaving the field and driving through seeing the strikers, of the Filipinos.
But the Filipinos face a dilemma. As they strike for a union, the farmers bring in Mexican workers to replace them.
It's one of the things I learned that farmers like to do. They like to pit the Mexicans against the Filipinos because you're going to be fighting for the same pot of gold.
Many Mexican laborers have already joined the National Farm Workers Association, led by the charismatic Cesar Chavez.
I remember meeting at the Filipino Community Hall in Delano. All the labor contractors were there, and a lot of the farm workers were there, and they're trying to decide, are we going to end the strike? Or are we going to negotiate with the Mexicans to join us? And then Larry Leon says, I'm going to go talk to the Mexicans.
When the strike happened, Cesar Chavez wasn't really quite ready. But Cesar also knew that if they didn't join Filipinos then it would never happen.
Larry approaches Cesar Chavez and his colleague Dolores Huerta. As one of AWOC's co-founders, her relationship with Larry and the Filipinos goes back years.
And then a couple days later, we're at this church. They're talking about the strike. They're discussing, should we go on strike or not go on strike? And all of a sudden there's this swalga. I said, what the heck swalga? Because I thought they were saying, hell no. I said, no, it means strike, we're going on strike. And so the Mexicans joined us.
Where are your brothers and sisters over here? Come on!
So he thought a huelga, which means strike, meant hell no. No, it meant yes. Musician and activist Agustin Lira and musician and producer Patricia Wells Solórzano talk about their experiences during this time. Let's take a look at the video.
Voy a cantarles, señores, todo lo que yo sufrí. One of the first strikes that I went to really blew my mind, because out there in the field were the tías, los tíos, los abuelitos, children. It was all ages, and all of these people were fighting for better wages, and many of them were losing their homes. I felt really ashamed because I had nothing to lose, so I stayed. And I had gone there 2 times, not making up my mind yet because there was so much violence, and I was afraid really that if I joined the union, I may not come out alive. So I left for a week, and then I thought about it and came back, and I decided to stay. In 1965, I got to Delano, California, and I was very surprised to see bunches and loads of Filipinos. I've never seen that many Filipinos in my life. And going out to the picket line, of course, they were all out there too. We were all working together. My life was expanded. It just grew because of the friendship that I made with all of them. And some of the songs that I sang for the Filipinos came from the Filipinos themselves, because they sat and worked with me and taught me the verses, and we worked out the music and sang it with them together before I would go up on stage to sing Dahil Sa'yo, because of you. They were members of a union of AWOC, AWOC, with the AFL-CIO. So they had their own particular leadership. But the Filipino Hall was the place where we met, where we had meetings. Not only did we eat there, but we had Friday night meetings, and the Friday night meetings were filled like with 500-600 people, 300 at times, and so forth. They were just full of campesinos from all over the San Joaquin Valley that would come down to Friday night meetings, where they would be exposed to music, and they would be exposed to theater, short skits about that spoke positively about farm workers for the first time. I had never seen any plays that spoke about farm workers in a positive light. It's always, there they are. We can't reach them. We don't know why they don't want to come out of the fields. No, Filipino Hall was the lifeblood. It was a heart beating. During the marches, I preferred to walk with the Filipinos. I did. It was just a groove that I could get into, and I was home. I was accepted. And the sad thing is that all the brothers that I work with are gone now. I lived, I slept, we worked together. We marched, we fought, we struggled, we cried together. How could I forget people like that? I couldn't forget them. They'll always be in my heart. I am one of them.
It was Larry, wasn't it?
It was the Filipinos.
They started the strike. And then the Mexicans had to, pretty much follow suit. But according to you, they were planning something, but then they had to jump and do it then.
Larry Leong was a good leader. I felt that we had a really good relationship with him, meaning all of us, But there was conflict too because of the different backgrounds and different cultures. And that would come out once in a while in terms of racism and so forth, but we dealt with it and we snuffed that stuff out. And we knew that it was tremendously important to keep that solidarity between the Filipinos and Mexicanos together. That we really needed to fight together. When I got there, the meetings would last hours and hours at Filipino Hall because it was English, Spanish, and 2 or 3 different dialects in Tagalog. So all this translating, it took super guts to make these meetings. But people really wanted to know, so they stayed there. And to relieve the pressure, Cesar would ask me, he'd say, "Tienes una canción nueva? You have a new song you want to sing?" I said, "Yeah, we brought a couple of people. I've been training them." He said, "Well, bring them over here." And they would give us one chicken shit microphone. That's why you see me holding the guitar up here like this, because the microphone is here and the voice, the box on my guitar is right here along with my voice. So I'm hitting the guitar and I'm singing into the microphone at the same time. That's why you see that. It's no flamboyancy involved, believe me. But we did a lot of performances there. And because it was a meeting place, it was also a mecca. It was a mecca for everybody that came from afar to be there, to sit, to talk to people who were actually involved in changing things, in fighting. And we took on many of the most powerful growers. These are the people that feed the rest of the world. Filipino Hall. To me, it was a beginning. When it taught me a lot about life, that I couldn't just hide myself and keep my pain and go away, that I had to be involved, that I had to become a part of the struggle, that I had to face my demons. I became a young man in the Leno. It changed my entire life.
Well, and several lives were changed in the course of this strike. Jose Calderon is a professor emeritus in sociology and Chicano studies at Pfizer College. As the son of immigrant farm workers from Mexico, he has had a long story of connecting his academic work with community organizing, student-based services, learning, participatory action, research, critical pedagogy, and multi-ethnic coalition building. We're going to see a TED Talk where he tells his story about how Cesar Chavez gave him a moment that changed his life. Let's go to the video.
There are moments in our lives that are transformational. One capacity that we have is to create culture. There isn't anything in this room that workers did not create where they use their minds and they use their hands. Unfortunately, this society creates a division between those who use their minds and those who use their hands. And often it is said that those who use their hands don't contribute as much as those who use their minds. I was an immigrant and I came here in 1957 with my parents. My father was an example of this hand in minds. My parents worked all their lives in the fields and they died not knowing English, and they were farm workers. But there was that transformational moment when my father, who did more than work in the fields. And for me, it was a transformational moment because it didn't happen until I was in college that I realized why the farmers were coming to pick up my father in the wintertime. We lived in a one-room house. We had an outdoor bathroom. And I chopped wood in the morning when nobody could see me because I was really ashamed that we had a wood stove. We were like squirrels. We had to work during the summer in order to make it through the winter. So the farmers would come and pick up my father. In Mexico, he had learned how to take care of cattle and sheep, bring small calves into the world, and he knew when they were sick. And actually, he was literally a veterinarian, and he didn't know any English, and the farmers found this out. And so rather than pay a veterinarian, they would get my father. A transformational moment. My father was very knowledgeable. My mother, she was knowledgeable. Oh, knew so much. And when I got involved in social movements, she challenged me. She didn't want me to be involved. And she says, ¿Qué estás loco, muchacho? Are you crazy? Why are you involved? And I said, at one point, I couldn't take it any longer, so I pointed to the San Martín de Porres. San Martín de Porres is a black saint. We'd always prayed to San Martín de Porres. I don't know why we didn't pray to the Virgen. And I said, you taught me, Mom. San Martín de Porres was a patron saint of the poor, and she always taught me that San Martín de Porres was always out with the poor and that he was always helping the poor. And so I said, Mamá, yo estoy haciendo lo que usted me enseñó. I'm doing what you taught me. And then she said, oh, ya entiendo. And after that, my mother got involved with us. I remember because we were so poor, we had to charge everything at the grocery store during the winter and then pay for it during the summer. And so there would be those times when at the grocery store, my mom would buy the milk, she'd bring it back, she'd pour the milk, and the milk is sour. So we sort of knew to just put it aside, and that week we knew we wouldn't have any milk. We did this for so many years and never told the grocery store. And then there was that one day after this incident with San Martín de Porres and the social movements, when my mother poured me milk and it was sour, and I saw her for a moment, just look at that milk. And I put it aside and I knew, I said, oh, that's okay, Mama, está bien, yo tomo agua. And I saw my mother take that cart of milk, walk out the door, go to the grocery store, come back and pour me milk. And then I knew the power of social movements and this transformational moment that was so important. I went to the University of Colorado thanks to the efforts of my parents. And in my senior year, I wrote a paper called The Rhetoric of the Chicano Movement. And I was inspired by Cesar Chavez. I read about the boycott of grapes in the fields. And I read about, this really got to my heart because one of the main demands was bathrooms in the fields. And this boycott began to work nationally. And why it got to me is because I remembered when I worked with my parents in the fields as a young child, and you needed to go to the bathroom, there's no bathroom, the women would form a circle so the women could go in the middle. And Cesar began to tell people nationally, you know where our farm workers go when they have to go to the bathroom? It's on that lettuce. It's on those grapes. So nobody was buying grapes. And I got angry, though, when I read, this is true, in 1969, the Defense Department, under the Nixon administration, bought 2.6 million tons. Later, it went to 10 tons. And you know where they put them? They put them on ships. And you know where they took them to? They took them to Vietnam. Close to 50% of those dying on the front line were black and Chicano. And then I began to question. I says, what kind of justice is this? Here we are fighting for justice abroad when the fathers of those sons who are dying on the front lines can't have bathrooms in the fields. And so on a whim, when I graduated, all I had was $57. I caught a bus, a Greyhound bus. From what I had read about Delano, I was going to arrive in Delano and there would be the central headquarters of the farm workers. So I caught this bus and I arrive in Delano, and books don't tell you everything. And I arrive at night. And there's no one there. And I'm lost. I go to a bar, they're against Chavez. A supporter finally tells me, go 3 miles out and you will find the central headquarters. For a while I thought he had lied, and he said it will be dark and you think you'll be lost, but keep going you'll get there. So I kept going. Eventually I arrived, and I see a light. There's a light. And there's Cesar Chavez speaking. And what he said that night changed the rest of my life, because I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. And he said, you know, the only thing in life for sure is death. And between now and when you die, the question is, how are you going to use your life? You can easily throw it away on drugs, on individualism, on selfishness, thinking that material things are going to bring you joy. But he said, but I can assure you that if you use your life in service to community, to empower others, when you get old, whatever you decide to be, whether it's a community organizer, a doctor, a teacher, a lawyer, when you look back on your life, I know that you will say it was very meaningful. That made me decide what I wanted to do. I stayed with the boycott. I stayed with the fast. I stayed with the picket for a while, but eventually I returned home to this little town of Alt, 1,000 people in Colorado in 1971. And I took my parents' garage, fixed it up, painted it red with a big huelga eagle on the side, put a door on it, and I started a school with 18 young children. I didn't want them to go through what I had to go through when I didn't know English in the first grade. And I used the method of Paulo Freire, the pedagogy of the press. I didn't have any money, but I knew that Paulo Freire said if you take people's words and give it back to them, it becomes powerful. In fact, they kicked him out of the country for that because it became revolutionary in Brazil. So what I did is I went to the store, I got cardboard boxes, I made big squares, and I would ask the children, I'd ask them, how was your day? Oh, muy malo. So I'd write malo on one side, bad on the other. Or another one would say, muy bueno, fine. You know, bueno on one side, fine on the other. Pretty soon these kids are carrying their big boxes of words home with them. And they begin to share those words. And they begin to become bilingual. And it was so powerful that the parents got organized and they went to the school board in Alt and they asked the school board for bilingual education. And the school board told them, if you want to be bilingual, why don't you go back to Mexico? Well, there were two young kids, Eddie Guerrero and Paul Flores, who got up a petition at the school for bilingual education. They were called into the principal's office and told, if you continue to pass out this petition, you're going to get kicked out of school. So I'm at the center one day, and here comes Eddie and Paul, and it's 10 in the morning. I said, Eddie, Paul, why aren't you in school? He said, they just kicked us out because we were passing out a petition. I was so upset. And again, we turned upset into something good. We organized the kids. We said, what are we going to do? And I had taught them well, right? Because I thought, we'll go picket the school. They said, no. Let's do like Cesar Chavez does, and let's march. Let's do a pilgrimage. We'll go from Little Alt all the way to Denver. That's 70 miles in the middle of winter. And I had a question about it, but ultimately, we did it. We started marching. We didn't have a parade permit. Highway Patrol stops us. I go and negotiate. We get a permit. And we begin to walk into every community, and as we walk into every community, we pick up people. I remember when we walked into the city of Fort Lupton. This is a farm worker community. We've walked 37 miles. We're hurting, really hurting. And we begin to see a light, again, a light. And there were, on both sides of the road, these farm workers were holding candles. And they were singing the song De Colores. De Colores is about rainbows, people of all colors coming together. It was something like, when I look back on it, it was something like a musical. And they had socks for us. They had hot chocolate for us. But the most transformational part was the next day when we all, hundreds of us, walked together to Denver, and we arrive again at night with a light. We didn't even know how we were going to get back. A priest got us a bus to return. We came back to our communities, organized walkouts in all the schools, and developed some of the best bilingual programs, bilingual teachers, principals. Chicano studies came out of those struggles. And brothers and sisters, those were transformational moments. Later, as I organized for 13 years and then end up at UCLA and finish a PhD, I come back to become a professor at Pitzer College. I wanted to do a class that maybe would make students feel the way I felt when I arrived in Delano. Well, this next March, we're in our 21st year. Right now, the class is taking place, and in a couple of weeks, we are going to Delano, we're going to La Paz. I've been doing this now for 21 years, and every year, those students are transformed. And again, as I started this, we create culture. We not only do service. Last year, we protested for methyl iodide. 1 week later, after our protest, methyl iodide is banned nationally. Our last day at La Paz, where Cesar Chavez is buried, we give back to the community through the use of theater, sharing with them what we have learned. Over the years, my students have walked out of those classrooms, sometimes into darkness, but I can tell you that in every case, there has been a light. You know, when I look back on what Cesar Chavez said, at that moment, that transformational moment, I have to think about what has happened since then. And I can honestly say that I've used every minute, every hour, every week, every year in service to community to empower others. And what Cesar Chavez said is true, that if something happened to me tomorrow, if I happen to get sick, if I happen to be at my deathbed, I have that joy, I have that light that I can truthfully say that my life has been very meaningful. And for those students who have found that same light, that meaningfulness continues today. That connection between what is academic and ultimately the transformational change that young people and we all have the power to create, a culture to create the kind of life, the kind of equal and just life that we would all like to live in. Thank you.
Well, that was Professor Jose Calderon, Professor Emeritus in Sociology and Chicano Studies at Pitzer College. And it's a pleasure to introduce two people who also lived through those fights with Cesar Chavez. They walked the same roads. And then in 1980s, they moved, Luz, María, and Antonio Ayala, moved to Paris, California, to grow their family. But once there, they began to see many injustices impacting their neighborhoods in the Inland Empire, and how they were treated harshly by employees, profiled by police and immigration, and ignored by politicians. In response, they founded TODEC to help their fellow recent immigrants learn English, secure citizenship, and create new connections in their chosen community. And I want to welcome both of them to this forum. Don Antonio, si pueden quitarle abrir su micrófono, gracias. I'm going to be translating what Don Antonio says, so just be patient, please. Don Antonio, gracias por estar con nosotros. I thank him to be with us. And what is your fondest memory with Cesar Chavez? ¿Cuál es su memoria, su recuerdo más valioso de aquellos años con Cesar Chavez?
Pues son muchas cosas las que aprendimos de él, pero sobre todo la manera de comportarnos siempre fue en la no violencia es nuestra fuerza. Y las experiencias que tuvimos después con durante las marchas, las huelgas, todo lo que hicimos durante las cosas que se tuvo que hacer para que quitaran, por ejemplo, el insecticida que era malatión, que era pues muy mortal. Me recuerdo yo que andaba la gente piscando, hombres y mujeres, pero lo que más impactó fue las mujeres que estaban embarazadas y aún así andaban piscando, cómo dañaban al vientre y salían los hijos deformados.
Permítame un segundo, sí. Don Antonio, para traducir. The question was, what is one of the fondest memories you have from those years with Cesar Chavez? He said there are a lot of memories there. The ones that he recalled most is the marches and the pacifist, the ideology of Cesar Chavez, and how they fought for the pesticides, some pesticides to be banned, especially when after they have seen pregnant women working in the fields, and once they had the labor, their babies, they were born with some birth defects due to the pesticides. Go ahead. Sí, adelante.
Sí, entonces después cuando me recuerdo también una de las marchas que acompañamos a César Chávez de varios días desde Deleno hasta Sacramento, y allí recuerdo que iba un sacerdote que en cada pueblo donde parábamos para descansar, para comer o para algo, ya nos estaban esperando. Y fue tanta la gente que se fue uniendo en cada pueblo donde íbamos llegando, que empezamos solamente 200 personas y terminamos más de 15,000 personas ya en Sacramento. Pero allí durante la marcha se iban haciendo pequeños versos de lo que la misma gente nos contaba, cómo los hacían sufrir, cómo batallaban y todo eso.
Permítame un segundo, sí. Don Antonio. He's talking about another recollection, another memories is some marches that they did from Delano, California to Sacramento. And he remembers that they stopped in a lot of points along the trip, and how people were expecting them with the priests and how they prayed for them. And they started 200 people, and every stop people were marching with them to the point that once they got to Sacramento, they reached out to the 15,000 people there. Go ahead.
Sí, entonces, ¿quiere que le cantemos un pedacito de la canción de lo que se iba componiendo?
Cuando íbamos caminando desde Leno para llegar hasta el rancho de Merced, íbamos en la noche donde se nos hacía noche, nos dormíamos. Hicimos una canción cuando salimos,
Pero cántala.
Cuando llegamos a Fresno, nos despedimos con fe para llegar muy temprano hasta el pueblo de Merced. Compañero campesino, esto va a ser un ejemplo. Esta marcha llegará hasta el mero Sacramento. Cuando llegamos a Stockton, toda la gente gritaba y que viva César Chávez y la gente que llevaba. Ya andamos organizando la raza por todos los files, porque muchos solo comemos tortilla con puro chile. Hay muchos que no comprenden, aunque uno les dé un consejo, la unión se hizo para todos, pero muchos se hacen el pique sign. Conmigo toda la vida, el pique sign, conmigo toda la vida. en casas viejas y trailas, propiedad de los rancheros. Allí viven mayordomos y toditos los barberos. Compañeros campesinos, que ninguno se nos quede, para gritar toditos juntos, ¡viva la huelga! ¡Sí se puede!
Perfecto, muchas gracias. Tenemos muchos comentarios favorables y agradeciéndoles. What Mr. and Mrs. Ayala were telling me is that song that they sung right now, it was in every stop they made, in every town they made, they gave them a little poems, a little phrases, and they recollected all and put them all together into a song, which is the song that we just heard. Someone wrote in the comments, beautiful, it really gets to the heart. Well, yes, it is, because it's the people, the farm workers, the community who are talking through those letters. Señora Ayala, en estos tiempos ahora ustedes trabajando ya desde Paris, ¿continúan con ese legado de César Chavez? Permítame nomás, I'm asking them if through all these years that they are working in the Inland Empire now, they're also continuing with Cesar Chavez legacy.
Si nosotros seguimos trabajando con los campesinos y también con todo lo que es de la unión y seguimos organizando, porque está llegando gente y tenemos que estar listos, así como llegamos muchos a este país, también decirles cómo podemos seguir adelante. Y también estamos yendo a los campos a enseñarlos a leer y escribir, porque trabajan en los campos y a veces les pagan muy poquito, pero estamos trabajando, no hemos dejado de trabajar. Tenemos muchos años trabajando, pero es una cosa grande que le damos gracias a Dios, Señor, que nos dé esa oportunidad de seguir trabajando y de tener esta organización, porque aquí también les estamos enseñando a los campesinos que no saben leer, escribir. Tenemos el proyecto de Nuevo Ciudadano y también trabajamos mucho por la amnistía, porque donde quiera que andaba la migración y ahí andaban también hacíamos canciones. Ya andamos organizando la raza por todos los files, porque muchos solo comemos tortilla con puro chile. Hay muchos que no comprenden, aunque uno les dé un consejo, la unión se hizo para todos, pero muchos se hacen el pique sign, conmigo toda la vida, el pique sign. Bueno, ha sido un trabajo, yo le doy muchas gracias a Dios de todos nuestros años que tenemos aquí y que nos hemos dedicado con toda nuestra comunidad. Es un trabajo de conjunto, de todos, y eso es lo que hemos seguido adelante. Y le damos muchas gracias a Dios que nos dé esa oportunidad de servir a nuestro pueblo.
What Mrs. Ayala said is that, yes, they continue working with the principles of Cesar Chavez, with the legacy of Cesar Chavez. There has been a lot of issues that they're trying to work with the communities, especially with the farm workers, the farm communities, farm workers' families, where they not only have a lot of needs, but also they're victims of immigration laws and fear because of that. And she said some of the ways we reach out to them is through songs, and she sang one of those songs. Right now, they have been doing a lot of classes for citizenship, voting, registration, and also right now they're working on vaccination for farm workers in the fields, right?
Yes.
Yes. Sí, se ha estado haciendo mucho de eso, porque ahora nuestra hija que está aquí, los gallegos por el apellido de casada, entonces también me vino a la mente eso durante los años de 1980 79, cuando íbamos hasta Sacramento, hasta Washington, a convencer al Senado de los Estados Unidos, al Congreso, para hablar con ellos, para convencerlos de la necesidad que había de que ya se diera una amnistía para todas las personas que no tenían documentos, porque en aquellos años, como había más discriminación que ahora y no había tanta comunicación, teníamos un amigo que era locutor y él nos decía, y cuando mirábamos a la migra por algún lado, en alguna calle, le hablábamos por teléfono, porque nomás había un teléfono aquí en la ciudad de Pérez, en aquellos años de los 79, 80, 81, por ahí. Después, cuando mirábamos a la migración, le hablábamos a Alfredo González, que era el de la radio. Le decíamos, Alfredo, anuncia que andan los limones verdes por tal calle para que no vengan por aquí, porque los limones verdes era la migración, como andan de verde. Pero él ya sabía por qué, la gente, la comunidad ya sabía por qué los limones verdes, y ya nomás él anunciaba en el radio y todos estaban listos con su radiecito, o ya sea si iban en el carro, o estaban en la casa, o andaban en el field. Entonces se les anunciaba, no pasen por tales calles porque están los limones verdes, y la migración pues no hallaba a nadie.
Prevenirlos. Vamos ahora, le voy a pedir a Luz que nos traduzca. Luz, please, you can do it very well as well.
Hi, Ricardo, and hi, everybody. Thank you for inviting my parents. What my dad was sharing was a lot of the struggle that, you know, our ag communities had here in the region. I know, remembering growing up when my dad was sharing that, the communities that we organize here, especially the Paris, all the way up to Coachella, were very ag, were back in the day, there was no technology, so they were in charge of going out to patrol the streets very early in the morning to make sure the border patrol wasn't out. So that way they could call the radio station. We had a local radio station that's still here, La Radio La Mexicana, and our compañero Alfredo González that passed away, rest in peace. My parents used to call them. They used to go to a payphone. It was the only payphone in between Moreno Valley and Paris, and they would call and they would give. They had codes. He would announce that Border Patrol isn't out, but he would say the lemons are not out, or they're not selling lemons. So there was code for ag workers, and once the ag workers knew they were paying attention to the radio, they would go out and harvest. But it was through those struggles, and even my you know, having my parents. As a child, we were born into the movement, even if we didn't want to, but those experiences really have made us, my sister and I, the persons that we are, and how we continue the legacy of Cesar, and also the legacy of my parents, because without them, we wouldn't have those experiences. But right now, you know, a lot of the advocacy, even the amnistía, the IRCA that was passed in the 1980s to help over 3 million immigrants, which basically helped farm workers, that were here before for a certain amount of time to gain their status. And just one thing that Cesar Chavez, I remember as a child, he was always saying, you always have to speak up. If you don't speak up, things are not going to get done. And that's what we continue doing, even with our new generations. Even up to now, like Ricardo was sharing about the vaccinations, I want to share this because this is a big win. This is a big win, not only for our organization, but for across the state and a lot of organizations as well, through what we have seen with the pandemic, how it's really hit our communities, our minorities, especially communities that are disadvantaged, like farm workers and all that. Through when last year when we started seeing a lot of our farm workers pass away because of fear, and fear, even going to the doctor, we started advocating to get resources down to the ag community and all immigrants in general. But as far as the vaccines, we started putting pressure on the governor's office and also a lot of electeds to prioritize our farm workers, because our farm workers have always been essential, not only on times of crisis, they always have been essential. So they need to have dignity, and for them to be prioritized with vaccinations. At the same time, we aligned with our advocacy with our education, because we knew we had to educate and create awareness around our ag, so they wouldn't fear the vaccine, because there's a lot of myths going on. So long story short, thanks to all that advocacy, we are the first county in the whole United States to vaccinate farm workers. Today, we have vaccinated over 10,000 farm workers in Riverside County. So this is a big win as we continue prioritizing the ag workers. The farm worker movement is not dead. It continues its very life and wealth with the new generations that through our parents and through real life experiences, Cesar Chavez has instilled the passion and the need to continue seeking justice for our immigrants and farm worker community. So this is a big win for Riverside County, and all of us here at UCR Riverside, we're very happy that, you know, we are the first county, but all this was done through advocacy, elevating the realities and challenges of our farm workers.
Well, Luz, we're almost getting towards the end of the forum, and I want to thank your parents. I want to thank you. And probably for Hispanic Heritage Month events, we will invite you to tell us what is the secret and how we can accomplish those achievements that you have, or how we can work together, with TODEC and help a lot of families that way. So, Luz María, Don Antonio, thank you, muchas gracias por su participación. I want to thank you once again y por permitirnos conocer un poco de este trabajo tan hermoso que están haciendo, de este trabajo tan poderoso para la comunidad. I want to I'm thanking them for the great work they're doing, empowering the community. Thank you very much.
Si hay tiempo, si me permite un minuto, le cuento una anécdota.
Nomás rapidito porque ya estamos llegando al final.
Ok. Es que usted sabe que cuando la gente de afuera, por ejemplo de México, se viene a trabajar, los tienen en el campo en galeras. Galeras quiere decir en sombras, pues, bajo un techo, pero sin paredes, sin nada. Entonces había en aquellos años, había un chinito que les hacía la comida a todos, pero como no les gustaba la comida que les hacían, porque les daban casi puro arroz y hasta lo maltrataban al chinito, pero el chinito callado, y se llega el día de dar gracias, y cuando le dice, se ponen todos de acuerdo, oigan, el chinito nos hace comida, aunque no nos guste, pero bien que nos la comemos, porque no le damos las gracias hoy que es día de gracias. Y dicen todos, sí, cómo no, ya es el momento de agradecerle y darle las gracias. Y dicen, mira, chinito, ya te prometemos ya no maltratarte más, porque le decían, hasta se la rayaban y todo, maldiciones. Y el chinito callado, no decía nada. Pero ya hoy, a partir de hoy, te prometemos que ya no vamos a decirte maldiciones. Y dice el chinito, chinito también promete no le inalce más en la comida.
Se vengaba de todas maneras. Sí. Bueno, pues muchísimas gracias por esta anécdota a la pareja Ayala, a doña María, Luz María y a don Antonio. Gracias, muchas gracias. And before we leave, I would like to end this event with some words. We Latinos know about being the target of hate remarks. Speaking of hate, I want to invite everyone who joined us today in this forum to embrace Cesar Chavez, pacifism, and unity spirit. Recently, our brothers and sisters from the Asian community have been experiencing a wave of hate attacks. I don't want to politicize this event, but I want to encourage everyone to stand up and with one voice, let's denounce hate. Let's embrace Cesar Chavez, a spirit of unity. Thank you very much. And sí se puede.
¿Se puede, compañero?
Sí, se puede.
Thank you for attending. Thank you very much.